Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sarah Beth, and I will be facilitating today's webcast, the Class of 2012, Understanding the Needs of the Future Workforce. Today's presenters, Suleman and Jenny Floren, will reveal and provide insight into our annual class of study. Before we begin, I would like to announce that you can use our hashtag #A_chat to ask questions, as well as the Q&A widget that you'll see below. Additionally, we will be taking time to answer questions from the audience at the end of the webcast. In the event that we don't get to all of your questions, everyone's questions will be answered by the presenters and accessible via a link that we will be sending in a follow-up email that you should expect to see within the next 48 hours. I'm very happy to introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker is Jenny Floren. From her own experience as an entrepreneur, Jenny knows firsthand what it means to challenge old thinking in the pursuit of innovation. Inspired by her younger sister's quest for the right post-college job, Jenny hopped off the corporate ladder and launched Experience.com in 1996, and she hasn't looked back since. The author of the book, The Innovation Generation, Jenny is a frequent speaker at nationwide universities and major business events to share her unique perspective on the up-and-coming workforce. Welcome to the webcast, Jenny. Our second speaker is Suleman. is the founder and chief evangelist of Achievers. Achievers is passionate about helping companies reward and recognize brilliant employee performance. Customized to your company's brand and culture, Achievers provides easy-to-use social technologies to create authentic moments of recognition that increase employee engagement, retain top talent, and drive business success. I'm pleased to have both speakers with us today, and without further ado, I'd like to welcome them into the webcast.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. Jenny, so we're back at it again.
I know. Great, thank you, Sarah.
I'm so excited about this year's study. You know, every year it gains momentum. Every year people actually started to ask me about it when it was coming out because, you know, as we all know, the class of 2012 is graduating this month, and they're entering the workforce. And, HR leaders and recruiters just haven't really got this demographic, so we get asked it a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so excited to talk about it.
Yes, likewise. Every year it's such a hot topic because clearly this new generation of millennials is a new breed, and more and more companies, employers and employers are realizing that it takes a new approach to really get their attention and get them engaged. So we're really excited to do this study again with you, Razor, and your team at Achievers, and I think the audience is going to enjoy some of the input that we've discovered this year.
Yeah, there's some great trending data. You know, we've been doing this study now for 3 years, so it's neat to see how, you know, over time, as the economy changes, you know, what are the sentiments of that generation? And again, I'm just so excited to be partnering with you on this. I'm going to brag about you because I know you don't do a good enough job about it. But I mean, you have 20 million students you've got access to, right? Like, you know what the nation's students are thinking. You know, you work with 130,000 employers, you know, have an amazing book that I actually read every year, The Invasion Generation, Learning the Gen Y Way. So it's great to get your time and insight, and I know that our audience is really excited to hear all the things that you've seen and experienced over this past year, as well as, you know, your interpretation of what the data is telling us.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So just to give everybody a sense of what we're going to be reviewing today, the real question on the table is what can we learn about this generation that will help us all as employers do a better job of recruiting, retaining, and inspiring top talent? And this is a very hot topic, like Razor, you mentioned a minute ago. You hear about it all the time. We hear about it all the time. And it's something that I think this big audience for this webinar today is a testament to what a hot topic this is. So just to give everybody a background on what we've done and the information we're going to be sharing here today, we went out to about 8,000 college-age juniors and seniors all across the United States to ask them a number of different questions to really try to get under the hood of, what is it that these guys are paying attention to? What is it they care about? Where are they paying attention to messages from companies? And really trying to understand what motivates them and drives them, because I think really understanding this new breed of talent is critical for employers who want to prepare their messaging and prepare their performance plans and their bonuses and their compensation. I mean, the list of things that really employers need to pay attention to get the attention of this audience is long and varied. So understanding who these people are is at the heart of it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So some of the things we're going to find and talk about here that were found in the data and things that we've uncovered include how this new generation of millennials search for jobs. So where do they look? What do they look for? That sort of thing. What this group values in an employer, which also ties back to what they look for, but then also what's going to make them happy once they're working with a team and at a company and an organization. And then, of course, how to engage millennials in the workplace. So once you're able to attract their attention and bring them on board, which is, difficult enough, but, once you're able to do that successfully, what does it take to keep them and to really bring out the most in their potential, to really bring out the most in this new generation workforce? So we've uncovered a lot of interesting nuggets we're going to share with you, and then we're also going to be following up sharing the full the data set in these slides with everybody afterwards. So a lot to cover. So
yeah. Speaking of sharing, Jenny, I'm not sure if you've been following this, but you're a social media superstar. The study has been picked up by Forbes. It's been picked up by Inc. magazine, Mashable, Business Insider. In fact, the Forbes article was the most shared social media article on LinkedIn yesterday. We were ranked #1, so it's definitely a hot topic. So excited to give the overview, and then obviously our audience will receive the 19-page white paper with all of the study findings and the data. So we're going to give you the closed notes version in our webinar today, and more data and goodness to follow it.
Great. Okay. So to touch on a couple of highlights, this generation is an entirely new breed, as I think we all know in participating in this webinar. Really understanding them is something that employers are really trying to do now, because it's obviously mission critical for all of our businesses, all of our team success. This group is not only our next generation of employees, but they are also, the next generation of customers, partners, government officials, the people making the laws. This really understanding this group and what they care about and what they're looking for is key. This is the future. They are the future. So there was a study done and an article written in the Harvard Business Review covering what they have found, what millennials are looking for from their boss and from their companies, what they want to learn in their jobs and in their careers. So these are just some interesting snippets we pulled out of that. But something I wanted to highlight is that when these millennials are looking for companies or for the new boss, you'll see a thread in here around wanting input and feedback and engagement. And, I feel like what I found in writing my book, The Innovation Generation, and what the Gen Y way is really all about, is that this generation is probably the most coached generation ever. They were scheduled in activities from day one, going to Spanish class, to the gym to learn karate, to music class, and at every step of the way had adults surrounding them with coaching and encouragement. And there are a lot of employers that would actually label that as the most coddled generation, but I actually think there's a huge plus to this, and that this generation really wants feedback, and they want to focus on progress and doing better and learning. And, that's what we all want from employees, right? People who will come in with an attitude of, I'm going to try to do better next time and keep going and growing. And that's really what this generation is about. It's a very big theme that these folks really do want to have input from the rest of us on how they can contribute and play a big role. So, Razor, I know that you see that a lot at Achievers in terms of working with the managers about how to keep the millennials excited. So this really seems to play, this backs up everything that Achievers is helping your customers do as well, right?
I'm smiling because, when you talked about sort of being the most coddled generation and been given the feedback and input, most of the customers we work with are, VPs of HR, VPs of recruiting at, the 100 best companies to work for type places. And they're always puzzled by why this generation is what they are, and they're entering the workplace. And most of these, men and women who are in these VP of HR positions are probably now boomers in their careers. They've been there for, 20-plus years. And I'm like, it's because you created them, right? They are your kids at home. This is the way that you've been giving them feedback. You've been coaching them. You've been involved in their education and their extracurricular. And then you bring them into the workplace, and that's what they know. That's all they've been ever given. So you need to change the methods that you use to motivate and engage and reach and connect this generation, because they're the biggest generation. They're bigger than the boomers, right? Companies need to change because Gen Y is who they are, and that's the way they've been created. And it's so interesting because there's such a big disconnect of what companies do, right? They still adopt the best practices of the industrial age and what Generation Y wants. And if you look at sort of Harvard's list, right, will help me navigate my career path, will give me straight feedback, will be mentors and coaches to me. The results in our study align perfectly with the Harvard study. And too many companies, it's everywhere. Harvard's talking about it, our study's talking about it, the media's talking about it, and HR professionals know what they're like. But again, their companies have this inertia that we just need to break. Yep. There just needs to be a change in the way the world works. Yep. And I'm excited to help lead that revolution.
Exciting. Well, let's talk about how to go about recruiting these folks. And then we're going to jump into the other two sections of the core presentation, which is recruit followed by retain and inspire. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here, but it starts off with how do you get these folks on your team to begin with? How do you go and get their attention? And like we've mentioned, it's probably harder than ever, given that this generation does have so much information at their disposal. And their attention is so scattered, across so many different sites and venues and companies and employers vying for their attention. It's a really tough challenge on how do you stand out, get their attention, and attract them to your team. And I know Sarah mentioned some of this in introducing me as a speaker. An experience as a company, we've had 16 years of experience working to connect college kids with employers who are looking to recruit that entry-level talent. We've been doing it for about 16 years and have about 20 million students coming from high school into college, into the working world through the network, through our network, and we connect them with about 130,000 different employers. So we see a lot of what the best practices are, what these students are looking for, what their behavior is all about, and what employers are doing to try to get their attention. And so we bring that experience into this conversation and study, and the study that we've done here with Achievers really, I think, puts the icing on the cake about making it really clear about what those best practices are. So to start off with, let's talk for a minute about what these millennials do when they're looking for a new job, a new company, or to launch their career path. The most striking thing here is looking at the prominence of what is number one on this list, which is applying directly to the company itself. Now, what this means is, this is a young person saying, okay, if I want to go work for, let's say, Google, I'm going to go find Google, go to their site, go to the jobs area of Google, or go, find someone who works at Google that I know, and they're going to apply directly to the company. But let's say you're not Google. Let's say you're not one of the most biggest brand named, recognizable employer brands with, great positive cachet that people are excited about to begin with. Let's say, you're basically anyone else. How do you go and get the attention of this audience? How do you get your name out there? And that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. But obviously, understanding that this group anticipates going directly to these companies says a lot about what companies need to do to build their awareness with the millennials. They need to be aware of you before they can consider going and looking to you as a future employer. And you'll see in number 2, number 3 here, looking for opportunities with career services at their campus or through a networking event and friends. These are known people who can help them find known companies, and known employers. That's really the mentality, is I'm going to go straight on my own, or I'm going to go to a trusted source who knows of opportunities at these places. So being known among the millennials is critical.
Definitely. And, Jenny, I'm so interested, obviously, in trending data. And now that we've got 3 years, I look back at 2010, and which were the categories, 3 years later that have been the biggest movers and shakers. And, applying directly to the company in 2010, that was 49%, sort of the middle of the pack. And today it's at 88%. The role of employer branding has never been more important than it is to the Gen Y generation. And I think that number is going to it's going to break in the 90s, in my opinion, next year. And I think that's a lesson for HR professionals. Recruiting, as a recruiter, they need to really think of themselves as marketers. I think the HR function and the marketing function has actually a very similar process. And, I know at Cheers, we actually make them sit very close together because the methodology around building a brand and building an employer brand, looking for, customers to service as well as looking to top talent to hire actually follows a very similar process. So that would be my first key takeaway. The HR professionals, hang out with the marketing professionals, learn about how to manage a funnel and how to build an employer brand, because that is only going to become that much more of an important skill set to work on. I also look at, I always like the LinkedIn versus newspapers. That to me is always intriguing. When we did a study in 2010, LinkedIn was near the bottom of the chart at 5% of students went to LinkedIn. LinkedIn was mainly regarded, particularly back in 2010, as sort of, a professional, executive, white-collar sort of network. But in 3 years, they've done a really great job. And, Jenny, I know you guys have partnered with them to really focus on that, the new grad in the class of 2012. They had a 700% increase in 3 years and have broken away from Twitter and Facebook as the go-to careers social network. That's where, Gen Y is looking online to find jobs. And, they went from 5 to 35%. And in those same years, newspapers went from 34% in 2010, and they dropped down to the third bottom at 26%. And to be completely honest, I'm even surprised about the 26% of students that are going to newspapers. That surprised me. Maybe it's a campus publication or something, but that to me was unusual. I look at also the trends in the referrals through a friend, and what we've seen a huge trend is sort of the rise of social recruiting, and it's really it's a way to get at the passive candidate market. While Facebook and LinkedIn may not be their first choice of where they go to look for new opportunities, we find that once a Gen Y employee is at a workplace, they've got obviously friends on Facebook and Twitter where they spend a lot of time, and companies are using their employees to post things about the company, share recognition, and really see the passive candidate market, right? Because you know what? Statistically they're going to leave after a year and a half, and if you can be at the right place at the right time and be in the networks that they're spending a majority of their time on, That's a good way to get them, maybe not off their initial when they're graduating, but definitely, as they're looking for their second and third job, the referral through a friend using, social recruiting we see is just a huge opportunity.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And so, this really begs the question, what are employers doing to take advantage of this knowledge? Knowing that going directly to the company is going to be the primary way that the millennials, go about their effort of finding a new company and finding new opportunities, followed by relationships with, people that they know, or going actually to an event of some kind and forging new relationships with employers, or through their counselors at their schools. Going after it themselves and taking the bull by the horns, meeting people themselves is really where, what they're looking at. And social networking ties right into that. But what are the best companies doing as far as best practices to take advantage of this? And what we see is that, one of the key takeaways from companies who are doing a great job at getting the attention of the millennials, some of the things that they're doing are, first of all, participating in career fairs and going on campus, working with schools, doing on-campus interviews, or participating in mock interviews, which is really helping in a practice round to coach millennials. That's one way of getting in front of them, even if you're not actively recruiting them right at that moment. That's a great way of brand building. Doing workshops or info sessions are also great ways to build awareness. And remember, this generation is not only the most coached, they're also the most connected. So these guys are naturally wired and have been from birth to go and share everything they know with everyone they know. They get online and update about who they saw, who did what. So if you meet one millennial, the network effect of having that person go and share their interaction with you and their experience with you with all of their friends and start passing on the words, about your involvement, how you help them, the fact that you are supporting their school or being involved in the coaching, all of the word of mouth around among this group is unbelievable, and it's instant. So you can get even participating in small-scale events. Let's say you're a smaller company or a mid-sized company, you don't have a huge recruiting team to go do, huge amounts of mock interviews or campus visits and that sort of thing. Even doing, whatever it is you can make a difference because of this network effect among this group. If you want to take it up a notch, doing co-ops, having students work with you for co-op jobs or internship opportunities, even having them shadow your employees, which basically means coming and visiting and spending the day with your employees, can make a huge difference. These groups, this group of millennials, they are thirsty for knowledge. Again, they want to learn. They want to know what they can do. They want to understand their choices. And so anything you can do to engage them makes a huge difference. And, of course, technology demos, really showing your product and anything that they can do to be hands-on, they love that. So these are just some of the things that, that are best practices that we've seen employers are able to do to engage millennials in a very direct relationship building kind of way, so that when these millennials are going out and looking for opportunities, they're aware of your company name, they're aware of what you do as an employer. They've already started to build a basis for an affinity for you and your employer brand, and so therefore they're more likely to seek you out, which is what we know is going to be their behavior. They're going to go seek out who they know.
Definitely, and when I go on campus, what always surprises me is that it's often the top, the best 100 companies to work for on Fortune magazine's list that are often the most represented. And I'm thinking, you're the best companies to work for. Why are you being as aggressive, in the campuses, doing the mock interviews, coaching the Gen Ys? And because, you figure that they'd have an abundant amount of resumes, but I guess that's the type of stuff that makes the best 100 companies the best 100 companies.
Yep. Absolutely. And, so one of the questions that we hear a lot is, well, what if you're not, what if you're not Google or, one of the big brand names that everybody's aware of, or you don't have a huge infrastructure of college recruiters to go and blanket, all of the campuses that have the talent that you're looking for. What do? And one of the other best practices, even for big-name companies, is going digital and really being out there where the millennials are. So, the expression of, where do you fish? Well, you fish where the fish are, if you want to catch a fish. So being online is where the millennials are. So having a robust recruiting strategy online is absolutely key. And employers of any size at all, can be successful in engaging millennials online. Some of the things that we've seen best practice-wise from employers that experience include, taking advantage of some of the services that we help employers with, which includes reaching out to the colleges and universities that are part of the Experience Network and getting their brand out there through online promotions or microsites, even direct invitations to, that we can help employers invite students to consider their opportunities and be proactive by sending them an email or going online, sending them notices through, our network's platform. Just getting in front of them and letting those millennials know that you want them is a critically important message. Because, again, these guys are going to seek out who they know, and if they feel like they're wanted, they're being sought after, that is something that really resonates with this group because, they're new to the working world. So, and they respond very well to coaching and care. So when employers signal, we want you, we want to bring you onto our team, we know you're going to be a great contributor to our team, those kind of messages really resonate and get the attention of the millennials.
And I think, the online, digital channel has never been more robust. Again, millennials spend more time on social media and the YouTubes and the Facebooks of the world than they do in any other traditional source of media. So I think the web's been a great level playing field, right? So it allows small companies to have a voice, to have a reach. And, yeah, you may not have the budgets to sort of be at all the campuses you want, but anybody can have an online presence if they know what they're doing. And often, when I talk to Gen Y, they actually prefer that. They prefer to be able to see a broader selection of opportunities and not just the people who come on campus. So obviously there's advantages of being able to have that face-to-face interaction. But the beauty of the web is that, you can learn about a company, you can watch its videos, you can use social networks to see who you know at that company. And, in your pajamas at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're procrastinating, before a night before an exam and you're dreaming about graduating and making some money to pay off your student debt, being online when they're there to look for you is the power of what every company can bring to the web. And so if you don't have, if you're not fishing where the fish are biting, then it's definitely a lost opportunity. It's a really inexpensive, authentic way to really build your employer brand. So I would definitely encourage companies to get online if they're not already.
Yep, absolutely. So why don't we look at a couple of examples of companies that are doing a great job of bringing their brands online and engaging millennials. This example from Coca-Cola, which you can see directly from Cook's website, just always amazes me because, you think about old school companies that have 100-plus year histories and, very rich heritage have completely transformed the way that they recruit and present themselves to the millennials. So I love seeing that this is possible even for the oldest companies with the most history to be at the cutting front edge. So you can see here. I mean, they've got over 40 million likes on Facebook. They've painted their brand on Facebook. They interact with millennials regularly. They've got fresh content on there. Employers, this is an easy opportunity to be out there and in the world of millennials, getting on Facebook, being online. And it's super easy to update fresh content, keep things relevant, talk about the new millennials you have on your team, what projects they're working on, again, where you're going to recruit, what openings you might have coming up, how important millennials are to your team. I mean, we found, which I think is intuitive and obvious these days at this point, but, basically all of the millennials, almost all, are online. They're using social media sites. They're on a lot of them, so that's, the other thing to keep in mind. Obviously, Facebook is huge, but the scattered attention, is definitely a factor. But, start with Facebook. Be out there and get your message out there, and your own websites as well. Because this is really where the millennials are paying attention. We're going to talk in a minute, again, about the messages that you want to get out there, but where they are is online. So it's very important to have your presence out there, like Reza was saying a minute ago.
Well, let's talk about another company that's sort of near and dear to my heart, which is Salesforce is our other example. So, I'm based in San Francisco now, and that's where Salesforce is based. And, it's a company that barely existed 10 years ago. So it's interesting to see the rise of that company. And they only have a few thousand people, so they're nowhere near the scope or size of Coke, but they're doing a great job. And what I love that Salesforce does, probably better than any other company, is that they use their brand, their company brand, and their employer brand, and it is synced. Like we're a Salesforce customers. I've been to some of their conferences. They really make it seem like a consistent Salesforce experience, and that's why, again, HR sitting next to marketing and the two of them working together, because those two need to be having the same consistent message, same branding, same look, same feel, and you get the synergies of the marketing dollars or the HR dollars. In their company brand, they really focus on the Salesforce plus Burberry equals like. And if you look at what they've done on their career page, it's Salesforce plus you equals like. They just replaced out a customer versus a candidate, which I thought was just a brilliant way. And they've really done a great job of branding the hashtag dream job, right? This is just not any job. This is a dream job. And they, they have a huge billboard on the 280 as I, drive up from the San Francisco airport to our office. And they've just done a really great job both, in the physical world and in the online world of having a really great consistent brand that aligns with their company brand.
Absolutely. And, I think one of the interesting things also about Salesforce is how they have taken, like you said before, when employers really need to act like marketers, even from a recruiting perspective, their marketing is the job of HR when it comes to getting talent attracted to the team. And, these guys do an excellent job of really bringing in their employer brand in so many different facets. Not just, clearly going way beyond just putting job postings out there. They're recruiting all the time, even, outside the scope of having one specific job opening. Building their employer brand is really the approach that they're taking and finding really clever ways to do it. But again, I think when you're thinking from the employer's perspective, you don't have to be able to afford a billboard to be able to win this game and get the attention of millennials. I think one of the key takeaways that we found, in this study, and it was the same in my book, and what we've seen at Experience, watching employers and their best practices, it's about relationships and building your employer brand relationship with the millennials directly. And a company of any size can win that game. You don't need to be a big brand to build relationships. And it is the relationships that matter most. As we saw in the data, the millennials are going to go to what they know and what they feel an affinity for. So as an employer, you could start using your current networks of your current employees. Start with having people go back to their alma mater, and be, engage with the schools, working with the up and coming classes at their schools or schools in your neighborhood. It's another, everything is local. It's great to go, down the street if you've got colleges down the street and, talk to the Career Center, ask how you can engage. I mean, it's the job of the Career Center is to help you as an employer connect with their students. And they're great people in the Career Centers that will go above and beyond to help you be successful. And that's true for companies of any size. And what Career Centers will tell you is that so many millennials are actually looking for organizations that aren't necessarily the big, Fortune 100, big brand names, many millennials are looking for opportunities where they can have what they perceive to be a bigger impact sooner. So as a smaller company or a mid-sized company, that's a great part, an aspect to work into your pitch, that millennials and their new way of thinking is going to be really welcome to your team and is going to have a big impact right away. That kind of message is like magic, to the millennials, because that's what they want. They want to dive in and participate. And, that's why I also think, so many, 70% plus of the students plan on finding a job through networking or a recruiting event of some kind, because they want to go out and they want to really understand what these organizations are about. So they want to come and they want to meet you. They want to get a sense for what you're all about. And, of course, you can do that online. You can build networks online. You can build your social networks starting with your own team. But really understanding what you're all about, what you stand for, and what opportunities are in it for them, and that you want them, that's really the key.
Jenny, you reminded me of a tactic that we use at Achievers that I'd love to share with our audience today that I think is really effective. We've got offices in San Francisco, Boston, and Toronto, and we're often heavily recruiting in the schools around those cities. And what we do when we hire someone from that school is we literally send them back in their first year, and we try to get them to talk to their engineering class where they graduated from, because there's a lot of seniors there that are looking for their opportunities, and they trust their fellow alumni. Right? That alumni is going to talk about their experiences, what the world is like, answer questions. They can relate to the audience. And, those staff of yours, in their first year, they're probably the least expensive staff. They're probably a drive away from the schools you want to recruit to, and they're often very welcome back into the schools that they've come from. So that's a really inexpensive way to get in front of the audience of where you want to recruit from.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about retain. Now that we've figured out how to get them, let's talk about how to keep them there. And, the data is, again, really, really interesting. Often if you ask HR professionals or CEOs, what do you think is the most important thing that millennials want in a workplace? We're actually doing our next study is to talk about the differences of what the workers want, what HR wants, and what CEOs think they want. And often you'll see that money comes out as number one. But the reality is that money, while an important motivator, is not number one. For millennials, it's career advancement opportunity. Progress is such a huge motivator. They expect to start at an entry-level role. They have realistic expectations in spite of what, their reputation might perceive them with. But what they want to do is they want to come into a company, they want to learn fast, they want to contribute and add value, and they want to work with a manager who acts like more of a coach and a mentor who's going to take them under their wing and develop them and show them how they can get to their next level of success, how they can contribute to the organization in a more meaningful way, take on more responsibility, and they want to do interesting work. So those, and I focus on the career advancement, the interesting and challenging work, and mentorship, because all three of those are free. I don't care if you have a Google-sized budget or if you're a startup. All of those can be addressed by training managers, getting them to understand that their roles as coaches and what millennials are looking for that costs you nothing. In fact, the opportunity cost of losing them is so much more significant. And if I look at, again, trending data, in 2010, career advancement was 38%, and this past year it shot up to number one at 54%. It is the most important thing that Gen Y looks for. If I look at training and mentorship in 2010, it was at 17%. It is now number 4 at 31%. It's almost doubled in a 3-year period. And again, I see that trend continuing as more and more millennials enter the workplace. I always smile when I look at the other stats, and manager being at 11%. And I think there's probably other more seasoned professionals in our audience who are smiling, who realize that the old adage of people join companies and leave managers, to me, Gen Y hasn't figured that out yet. They think when they work for, we'll use Google as an example, that that's who their employer is. They don't realize that their direct manager is the most significant thing on how they're going to learn, what they're going to work on, how they're going to develop, when they're going to get promoted. That person really dictates what your experience is like in a company. So I think when you've been in the workplace for a little bit of time, you realize how important your direct manager is. But, it hasn't dawned on Gen Y yet, but it will. It will. I'm sure if we did this study with the same people and asked the same questions 5 years from now, I think manager would shoot up to either number 1 or number 2.
That's a really good point. But on the flip side of that, I think so what they're saying with having the career advancement and opportunities and interesting and challenging work and mentorship, those things being towards the top. I think they're part of what they're saying is I want a company, an organization that's going to invest in me. I want to be able to contribute, but I want something back. I want to be in an environment where people can learn. And so I think you're absolutely right. They haven't quite connected the dots to the direct manager per se, but I think they are signaling that being in a culture that shares their values and is going to invest in them as contributors is really important, and something that we've seen far too few employers include in their employer brand messaging. Like you said before, Razor, these opportunities, to invest in people in this way, they're free. You don't have to buy a billboard. You don't have to buy a Super Bowl ad, right? It's, just paying attention and focus on investing in your young people is really, what it takes. And it's even less expensive to highlight that in your messaging when you get the word out there. So many employers just talk about, here's what I need you to do in this job. And that's the crux of the message they're getting out there. But employers that successfully get the attention of millennials say things like, we want you on our team because we know your new approach is going to make a difference to our team. We want your new thinking to be part of how we build innovation at this company. We really expect even our newest employees to make a difference early on. And we're going to invest in you with either mentoring or training or shadowing other managers. You don't even have to have a full-on, humongous mentoring official program to highlight the benefits and the fact that you care about having your managers invest in the next generation.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's keep moving right along. We got lots to cover. And we have a pretty infographic, sort of the latest and greatest in absorbing information. And this will be a part of the white paper. You can download it from our site. But some of the ones that I want to point out, we talked about great managers being great coaches. And I think about, how business is really like a competitive sport. I think about, if a football coach and his quarterback talked once a year, did an annual performance review, that football team would be dead last. Like, that just doesn't work. They're literally talking on the fly 3 or 4 times each play. And while that might be an extreme example to show you, annual performance reviews is not what really resonates with Gen Y. It is all about giving real-time feedback. It's recognizing them for the great work that they've done because it reinforces the behaviors that you want to see. It contributes to building a culture of high performance and open communication and ultimately a more engaged workplace. There's so much overwhelming research that will show you that an engaged workplace outperforms. In our study, according to the Hayes Group, their revenue growth was 2.5 times of their competitors of lower engaged workplaces. So it has a business impact and it returns value to shareholders. So figuring this out is not only good for the company, but it's good for the shareholders. And it's just a great place to work when companies have adopted the principles of the knowledge and service age workers that we're now dealing with in North America. That's 70% of our economy is driven by the intangible economy.
Absolutely.
Let's move along to key takeaways on that. And, we want to introduce the concept, we did it on this past webinar, about stay interviews. Too many companies are doing exit interviews. Well, after 18 months when a Gen Y has left you, to do an interview then and have a conversation is actually too late. they've already accepted their job, they're already one foot out the door, they've already emotionally checked out. What we recommend is doing quarterly stay interviews. Sit down with them, ask them how they're feeling, tell them what they're doing well, ask them where they want to see themselves progress in the company, and you as a manager need to be their coach in helping them be open and honest about getting there. And having that proactive conversation before the relationship is over, we recommend eliminate the exit interviews, do stay interviews, get your managers on board with that. Weekly one-on-ones, again, touch points, it could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour. It's not a long time, but it's important to create the rhythm inside your company of having open and honest conversations with your staff. Focusing on, we talked about career path and growth, huge motivators. Listening to what makes them tick is important. And you kind of see what Gen Y is saying about the performance review. It is an antiquated tool. We're seeing more and more companies do away with it. Giving real-time feedback is really what Gen Y expects. It is a better way to help coach them and navigate their careers and keep them for a longer period of time and get better performance.
Absolutely, and Razor and the team at Achievers knows what it takes to help companies retain their top talent. That is for sure, and something that I completely agree with all of these points. And also, when you talk to the millennials about their desire to stay with the company, these are the things they're telling us that they want. And the companies that give it to them, are able to retain those millennials. But I think what's really interesting, we're going to touch on this point next is about how these millennials plan to stay at their first job.
Yeah, so, I talk to often a lot of VP of HRs, and they're like, the problem with millennials, Razor, is that they only stay for 2 years. They only want to stay for 2 years. And that's actually not true. The research is clear that they enter the work relationship hoping to stay 5 or 10 years. They were our number 1 and number 2 response. And if you actually average all of the responses, it comes to 4.7 years. So yes, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, they only stay for 1.5. And that to me is a shame, because that 3.2 years that you're leaving on the table is very expensive. That first year when they're, new to the workplace, new to your company, they're still feeling their way around, you're probably investing a lot of time in them. You're ramping them up into being a productive employee and, adjusting to corporate culture. And it's probably more of an investment in them than they're returning in that first year. And so to lose them 6 months later, and have to replace them, that's a very expensive proposition. What we recommend is, have an open and honest conversation when they start. Sit down with them and say, hey, listen, you know what? We want to have you work here for the next 5 years and beyond, right? The 25-year gold watch thing does not work with Gen Y. But if you say, hey, in 5 years, you're going to come in as, a marketing coordinator, and we're going to show you how in 18 months you can get to a marketing specialist. And then from there, we're going to show you how you can get to a marketing manager a year and a half later. And you can show them what the path is, and you can show them other people that were like them last year that came from their school that is on that journey. Instead of them leaving for your competitor in 18 months, work with them to show them what their next level of promotion is going to be inside your company. Because if you don't, they'll find it somewhere else. And I think it's such a travesty when that happens. And it first starts with HR believing that they want to stay for almost 5 years. So we need to dispel the myth that, no, they're only going to stay for 2 years. That's what happens. But if you go into the relationship thinking it's only going to last for 2 years, then you're probably going to be wrong, because it'll be less than that. And that's just a really expensive way to train your competitors, on your dime and have them leave for someone else.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, the key here is really knowing that millennials are loyal. They want to be loyal, and it's the employer needs to take the responsibility to encourage that. It's more often than not the employer is making them leave. It's not that the millennials want to leave. The millennials want to stay.
Great. Well, let's talk about my favorite topic, which is inspire, right? We found them, we have them there, and really, in a knowledge-based economy that we're in, it's not enough just to have employees come to work. You can come to work and spend 8, 9, 10 hours and shop online and do your taxes and connect with all your friends on Facebook. And I think the problem of presenteeism, where their physical body is at work, but emotionally and mentally they are not there, is actually a very expensive problem. Gallup, estimated that the lack of, disengagement in the American economy is a $300 billion problem. So we need to solve that. Getting them to show up to work is not enough. How do we inspire them? How do we get the best performance? How do we get not only their hands, but their hearts to come? And so we asked a question around, your base needs are taken care of with salary, your security needs are taken care of with benefits. And what was really interesting about Gen Y is that they're very Maslowian. In 1943, Abraham Maslow came up with a hierarchy of needs. And what was really interesting to see is that more than any other generation, Gen Y operates at the top of Maslow's pyramid. They're the most self-actualized. They're the most have the highest self-esteem that comes from recognition because they've been told their whole life of how great they are. And they're not really worried about base needs. They're not really worried about the material possessions, that they've seen their parents slave away at work to keep up with the Joneses and to buy a bigger house. That's not really what drives and inspires and motivates these. If you look at the bottom of our list, timepieces, grandfather clocks, 15%, plaques, 14%, branded merchandise, 9%. The stuff that North American companies are spending $47 billion on every year is not motivating these people. When the recession hit in 2008, we just told our customers to stop wasting your money on those bottom three, because I think this is actually not a Gen Y problem. I think this is a problem of every generation in the workplace. Those types of things may have worked, on the assembly line 100 years ago when people were just a cog in the machine, but they're not inspiring anyone today. If you look at what they want, it's things that are more experiential in nature. It's things that are more intangible. They want to have a rich life, and it's not measured by the number of widgets that they collect. It's not measured by the materialistic type things. It's measured by the experiences that they have, the connections that they make. And so, we really encourage companies to really align their programs in terms of inspiring their staff to focus on what is really what everyone in the workforce is asking for.
Absolutely. In fact, some of the data even indicates that some of these things that are lower on the list here are actually disincentives to millennials because they view them as wasteful. Why waste the time and the resources and have the impact on the environment of making all this stuff that they don't really want or value or aren't going to use?
Definitely. Our next one is just on the key takeaway. We talked about how traditional service awards, right? They've been around for 100 years. And how they died in 2009. I actually was talking to a candidate who asked for my advice between two really well-respected companies in the Bay Area. And, they've both been around for a little bit of time. And he was leaning towards one, and I'm like, well, what made you feel one way or the other? Because they were both sort of looking for engineering talent. And he's like, a part of the recruiting effort of, I'm not going to name the company, was they had this paper catalog, and they said, if I stay focused and I work hard in 5 years, I'm going to be able to, I'll be recognized for my service, and I'll get to choose a crystal vase or a grandfather clock. And the other company didn't actually offer anything, which was funny. I'm like, what did the other company do? They didn't actually mention anything. And he wanted to go in that direction. It actually acted as a disincentive, which I just thought was so funny, is that what they thought would be a selling point to this individual, they're not waiting for 5 years to be recognized. They want that feedback. They want to perform and get recognized for their contributions on day one, and then every week after that. Gallup had this, did this great book, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, and they talked about what great managers do that average managers and poor managers don't. And they found that the great managers give feedback and recognition on a weekly basis. They're the ones that are really going to connect with Gen Y. When those managers move on to their next jobs, they're going to have an army of people who want to work for them because they invested in their development. They gave them feedback. They recognized them for their great work and didn't take credit for it. And they definitely didn't put a catalog in front of someone and said, hey, in 5 years, you can get this irrelevant reward. Okay, let's continue. We're coming to the home stretch, and we've got a lot of questions on deck that we need to get to, so I won't dwell on this. We talked about progress. This is one of my favorite articles in that Harvard Business Review around how motivating progress is. And to me, it aligns perfectly to career advancement, right? People don't want to stay stagnant in their careers. They don't want to stay stagnant in their relationships. They don't want to stay stagnant in their life. And if you can show them a path, if you can make a commitment to show them how they're going to progress in your organization, you're going to have their loyalty. You're going to keep them focused on learning and growing and ultimately creating value for your organization. I highly recommend reading that article. It was very inspiring for me.
I mean, this really says it all to me, because the idea of the career advancement, I mean, this whole millennial generation, I mean, long story short, they are the wired generation. They live in real time, and they are coached to be very experimental and to try and to get coached and to learn and then try again and get better. And that's the pace they live their lives. It's try and learn and try again and learn and try again. And so the idea of progress and encouragement and really focusing on these folks as individuals, that's really the name of the game. And like the data showed earlier, they want to stay with you and they want to contribute. And so, if you're able to encourage them in that way, you're going to have loyal, long-term contributors who are bringing their A game every day. And that's what we all want on our teams, right? So that's how to do it.
Great.
So this, on the Achievers platform, this is something that I think the Achievers team and Razor and his folks have been working with employers for years now, really honing in on the best practices and how to get talent to not only come to your company and and stay and bring their A game. And I just wanted to point out that on this, engaging with millennials in the way that they're used to being engaged with is absolutely critical. So, the platform that Achievers has developed in terms of really bringing information in a format that millennials are used to in a real-time way, using sort of gamification and scorecards. And, this is the language that millennials speak. And so many employers are still talking in printed brochure language. But millennials don't speak that way. They don't hear that way. They don't learn that way. They don't engage in that way. And so, what I really have found, so inspiring in the work that Achievers is doing, has been the revolutionary way they are helping employers understand how to actually speak the language of millennials and engage with them in the way that they want to be engaged with. And, it's something that, we see 130,000 employers recruiting people every year, and, far too many of them are not engaging with millennials in this fashion. And there's so much to learn from this. So, Razor, I give you and your team kudos for really helping to bring out the best practice in this realm. Well done.
Thank you, Jenny. We've got wonderful clients who share with us what pains they're having, and we try to help serve their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we're going to wrap it up and get to our Q&A and our evaluation. But before we do that, I just want to announce that we have complimentary information that we will be sending off, which is the slides, the Q&A, the white paper, and the infographics for attending today's webcast. I also want to point your attention to this evaluation, which you're going to see in a few seconds here. It's just a link, and if you could fill that out and tell us what you thought of the webcast and give us some feedback and so that we can be better and share your ideas for future webcasts with us, that would be fantastic. So without further ado, let's get to those questions. So the first one is from our audience. Regarding millennials' disinterest in performance appraisals, how does HR encourage frequent informal feedback between managers and employees without losing control over appropriate written documentation to support performance issues? Fraser, do you want to start that off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think performance feedback needs to be ingrained in a company culture. You know, some of the things that we've done or we've seen as best practices, every one-on-one meeting would end with some sort of positive feedback around recognition of what the employee is doing well and an area that they might be able to improve on. And that way they can action it that week and have a conversation a week later or a month later, depending on how frequently you do the one-on-ones. There's nothing to say that the manager could not document that. You know, what we see on our platform is that everything about an employee is documented in their profile. So it's shared with them and shared with the manager. You know, all of that stuff is archived and captured, and it's done through a real-time recognition and feedback platform. So don't think that the annual performance review is the only way to do it. In fact, I think there are more effective, easier ways of capturing it and archiving it and documenting it, because I agree that's important, but I think waiting a year is just way too long.
Great, yeah, absolutely. One other thing I would just toss in there, and this is at the very tactical level, but something we've seen some companies do is they use email as a documentation vehicle, and they basically set up a little email file that a manager will be, coached to do, have a file for each of his or her direct reports. And as work is done in these one-on-one meetings and the feedback is given, as Razor's describing, they shoot off little emails to say, as we discussed today, and they keep copies of those emails in the folders for each of their employees, so that when the time comes to actually bring back either the annual performance review or to provide documentation for the file or whatever, there's a bit of just snippets of written communication trail for the files. And we all know that having the information for the files is really necessary from a legal perspective in the downside scenario when things aren't working out. But it's really important to have those positive pieces in there too, to have the full picture. So that's just another tactic I've seen employers use.
Great. Let's just do one more before we wrap up. You guys mentioned that the millennial generation want a bigger impact sooner. However, the reality is sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as they imagine. What is the best way to manage expectations? Not everyone can be a director by 30, even though the person is great. Razor, why don't you start us off here?
Yeah, I smile because we're hiring Gen Y all the time, and all of them want the CEO office by the afternoon. So I hear that. It's a common challenge. But to be honest, I'd rather hire someone who wants to be a director by 30 and manage them and their career than someone who doesn't aspire to do much more than what we first hired them for. So to me, that's a good problem to have. And I think, again, having that open, honest conversation about where they're starting, talking to them, and whether you can give them a little promotion. We know the folks at Zappos really well, and everyone at Zappos goes through CLT, their customer loyalty team, which is effectively their call center. Every single person who starts at Zappos, including some of their executives. And in over a 2-year span, they have 3 promotions based on skills, based on performance, and they help give you little mini promotions throughout your career, because that's a really effective way of showing progress. And it's based on, here is the program, here's what you need to do, and most Gen Ys are going to be excited by that. They'll be excited that you're that thoughtful as a company to meet their needs. They'll be challenged by that next level in their progress. And as long as you can chart a path out and have a really open and honest conversation, because you know what, maybe it's impossible at your company to be a director by 30, but if that's what they want, and they're coming to you as a 22, 23-year-old and they want to be a director, you know, before they're 30, that's not possible, well, then you should tell them about how 5 years at your company is going to get you to a manager level. And while it might be unlikely, even if after 5 years they find a director position somewhere else, they will have gotten the best training, the best development, you know, the best references by putting in a great 5 years at your company. So I think just having honest conversations at the beginning, but showing them a path to whatever is actually realistic in your organization is the key.
All right, great.
Could I add one thing to that, Sarah, just really briefly? Is I think the advancement in terms of title is one thing, but the question was also around wanting to have an impact. And I would just offer that we hear that all the time from employers, but if a new millennial is not having an impact immediately, you know, I think it's the employer's fault, because the millennials bring a ton to the table, and the employers have a responsibility to help them contribute and recognize what impact they are having. And it doesn't mean you have to give them a title change or an advancement change or whatnot, but I think that the main point is that millennials want feedback that they are making an impact and making a difference. And if they're not, you know, then what are they doing on your team?
Yeah, good point to both of you. All right, so we are going to wrap up now. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and thanks to Jenny and Razor for their time today. And look out for our follow-up materials. Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.